Some say quiet quitting is the next phase of the Great Resignation. I'm curious to learn more about this and give you some perspective on quiet quitting. Let's watch this video that defines what quiet quitting, what's happening in that space.
This is one example of quiet quitting, a trend that has been dominating social media and especially TikTok. In July, Zaid Khan, a 24-year-old engineer from New York, posted a video about quiet quitting, and it went viral. Since then, the trend has spread like wildfire with hashtags like quiet quitting, quitting, and quieting.
Does anybody want to work anymore?
Then the mainstream media began covering it.
Like working overtime? No thanks. Late night emails? Ignore those.
Quiet quitting is a really bad idea. If you're a quiet quitter, you're not working for me.
The world is changing and the way of work is changing. Even people saying, I'm not going back to the office. And if I do, I'm definitely quiet quitting until I find a job that is a lot more flexible.
COVID was the ultimate reset. COVID was that moment where people started to ask a bigger question. What do I want for my life? Do I want to continue working the way that I have? Or do I want something different? Do I want to continue to work, which is awesome, but do I also want to be able to enjoy my family? Do I also want to be able to enjoy my life? So I think all of these things are coming in stages, and I think quiet quitting is just the trend that's come as a result of the ultimate reset, which is COVID.
Something like 40% of workers are now saying they plan to change jobs this year.
The pandemic also triggered the Great Resignation.
Trying to retain people, but they're really running scared.
Millions of Americans quit their jobs in 2021, some for better opportunities, some for a career break. The pace of quitting continued well into 2022. This chart tracks job openings and labor turnover in the U.S. economy, JOLTS for short.
We do think that quiet quitting is part of the Great Resignation story. So it fits into the general story of having a high level of quits over the past year and a half, and certainly a very tight labor market. And in that type of a labor market, it makes a lot of sense that workers may not be willing to work as hard as they have in the past because it's very easy to get alternative employment.
A few things to consider. They're talking about the Great Resignation, which obviously has hit all-time highs as you look at the chart that they showed. There's also this concept of the Great Regret, which means some folks are thinking twice about the fact that they had a really good opportunity where they were, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, or on the contrary, the employer is hiring folks at rates that are not commensurate with the experience or not commensurate with the effort that's been the employee that they're hiring. So they regret overextending themselves to hire someone when they didn't need to. But there's the Great Regret, the Great Resignation. Now there's this quiet quitting term. Quiet quitting is basically, it's been known as a lot of things over the years. We used to call it coasting. We used to call it retired on active duty for folks who were still who are aging in the workplace and yet still punched the clock, still came to the office, but didn't really do any work. So they were considered retired on active duty. There's lots of ways in which folks show up. The term I prefer to use versus quiet quitting is that has a positive side is this concept of setting boundaries. And that's a healthy element to it because there are elements of jobs that don't have boundaries. And in order for you to maintain your own sanity and what is appropriate for you, setting boundaries and letting folks know when you're available, when you're not available, what's acceptable, turn around on things, that's all about setting healthy boundaries. I think the quiet quitting thing actually has this element of laziness or not trying. And I want to hear more about it because I think that's a negative connotation where I think it can take a positive as well. Let's keep watching.
The question is, what is quiet quitting? Quiet quitting is referring to a situation where employees are making a choice to not necessarily go above and beyond what they're being asked to do. It doesn't mean that they're not doing their job, They're just not going above and beyond.
Back in my day was called coasting. For me, my last time quiet quitting was 5 years ago. I used to be in tech sales. What I did was work less. I wasn't putting in the 40 hours anymore. I wasn't giving in to the drama anymore. I wasn't giving into work gossip anymore. I wasn't answering emails or texts or Slack messages, DMs after the work days. The weekends were free. They were mine.
Even though it's millennials and Gen Zers who are actively talking about it on social media, quiet quitting has been happening amongst Gen Xers, which I'm part of the Gen Xers, for the better part of 2 to 3 years.
The anti-work movement is not a new trend. In 2021, the lying flat or Tangping movement took off in China. Many viewed it as an anti-work phenomenon. This is a labor protest movement in China against the country's relentless work culture. Some argue that quiet quitting is similar to the lying flat movement. In the US, quiet quitting could also be a backlash to hustle culture, the 24/7 startup grind popularized by figures like Gary Vee and others.
I think it is almost direct resistance and disruption of hustle culture, honestly. And I think it's exciting that more people are doing it.
When it comes to hustle culture and quiet quitting, we're seeing from Gen Zers especially, they're really focused on ensuring that they have that work-life balance and really mission-driven purpose when it comes to work. And we see this across millennials as well.
People are being more honest about the fact that they just don't want to give beyond the 40 hours of work that they normally would give because they're tired.
There has been a tsunami of job resignations.
In 2021, the Great Resignation dominated the economic news cycle.
Or need to remain in their roles. So,
in the second quarter of the same year, U.S. productivity data posted its biggest ever annual drop. And some economists blame workers leaving jobs or not trying hard at their current jobs for the hit to productivity.
Quiet quitting.
The concept that there is an anti-work movement is interesting. I don't know if I believe that. I believe that there's an element of, and I call it just status quo, not trying that hard. Some of it could say it goes back to participation trophies where you didn't have to work hard in order to get awarded or recognized. And I think that's a disservice to the workforce. Because I think that there are times when they will work hard. I think there's times when that is. But I also think that those that do work hard, those that do have that hustle mentality, those that are willing to go above and beyond, the world is so open to you. And I mean that from the standpoint of you can stand head and shoulders above everybody else because there is an element of taking a back seat, being more low key about things. I tell my kids all the time, you hustle, you grind, you go, you are going to be one of the unique players in your market, in your class, in your peer group, because that hustle grind, it doesn't mean you do it at all expense. It doesn't mean you do it 100% of your time. It means that when you're working, you are working hard. And there's no doubt about that. Those are the types of folks that people want to see in their organizations. It begs the question, do you go to a shorter work week? Do you go to 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and yet you have a more concentrated, dedicated employee during those times versus this quiet quitting where you are there for 40 hours, but the type of work, the effort that's being made just isn't significant at that point. There's this, integration of our work to our life and where does it fit? And sometimes it's more of a passive aggressive view is to quiet quit and to be passive aggressive versus address the issue and figure out how to solve the issue. Let's keep watching.
Is probably part of the reason for the slowing in labor productivity. It's hard to tell from aggregate data exactly why labor productivity has slowed so much over the course of the pandemic, but it is certainly one of the reasons that you would expect to be weighing on labor productivity right now.
Employee engagement also appears to be declining. A recent poll from Gallup showed employee engagement in the US dropping for the first annual decline in a decade, dipping from 36% engaged employees in 2020 to 34% in 2021.
Disengagement, not being engaged, that's affecting the productivity. Mentally, they're just not there, and they really aren't giving it their all anymore. And they are just trying to stay under the radar, and they are disengaged. That's very much going to impact productivity.
I do think quiet quitting is a part of the Great Resignation. People are so burnt out. We've just gone through and are still going through a pandemic. We are recognizing that life can be so fleeting and so short, and we want to spend it doing something we love. And that doesn't mean work has to be our dream job. I think that myth of the dream job is slowly or rapidly dying.
People that shut down their laptop at 5 want that balance in life, want to go to the soccer game, 9 to 5 only. They don't work for me. I can tell you that.
Labor demand.
Kevin O'Leary is pretty hardcore in that messaging, but I'd also say that he's an entrepreneur. And you have to contrast employees to entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs don't punch a clock. They have to set their own schedule. They set their own hours. They set how much they work, what they work on. There's a lot of discipline in that world, where employees are told, here's when you work, here's where you work, here's what you do. There's a lot more parameters set around employees. And he's talking about the entrepreneur world, where you got to go get it, because the person next to you is also working hard towards achieving a similar goal or achieving positioning in the marketplace. So I look at it as the element of whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're an employee, and what your mindset is in that space. Do you want to create your own world and your own success? Well, that's where an employee may not be the right fit. You're more of an entrepreneur. Let's keep watching.
And remains red hot in 2022. That's despite the looming risk of a recession. An economic downturn could make quiet quitting a short-lived trend.
Well, if the labor market were to turn, you'd imagine that quiet quitting would become less of a phenomenon. Well, the risk if you're a quiet quitter is that the economy would slow, and you could find yourself in a situation where you're in a job where you haven't been given the most effort that you can, and it puts you at a disadvantage in terms of moving forward at that job. If others have been giving more effort, they're more likely to have greater job security than otherwise. So certainly as the labor market slows, and if we were to go into a recession, could potentially put those workers at a disadvantage.
In addition to talking to thousands of employees per year, I talk to thousands of leaders per year, all the way from your supervisor all the way up to your C-suite CEOs. And I will tell you that they are bothered by this trend because it speaks one of two things. One, we have employees who are doing their job, but they're not going above and beyond. Two, what have we done as an organization to these employees to make them feel like they can't give their best effort?
We're evolving as a culture. We're evolving as a people, and the workplace is evolving, and we need to be okay with it, because it's the same concept for me as people saying just because I didn't have it means you shouldn't have it too. You should have to work hard.
Just want to be careful about just saying that quiet quitting is the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys. I think that it can be happening all over the place. And the more we stay engaged and connected and share our purpose, the less of an issue disengagement will be. And then hopefully the quiet quitting term will start fading to the background, and we'll see both employees being productive and well engaged and employers being very successful.
A few last minute thoughts. One is, as my mom always told me, anything worth doing is worth doing well. And this begs the question of, why are folks willing to put their own work product and their own quality on the line to say, you know what, I'm not going to work that hard. I'm not going to produce that high a quality of product, or I'm not going to engage that way. That's a reflection on yourself. At least that's my belief. It reflects on your own personal character. And when you get a reference or when someone speaks of you, do they speak of you well? When they like the things, they do it really well. When they don't like it, they're kind of lazy or not productive or disengaged. That's a reflection on you. And that says something about who you are and how you show up in times when it isn't fun or it isn't what you like. And what does that look like? So, interesting concept, the quiet quitting, whether it's a new phenomenon or an old phenomenon that has resurfaced due to the pandemic, due to the Great Resignation and what is going on in the workforce. It's still something to consider. If you liked what I had to say here today, comment, subscribe, like below. Your business profit. Until next time.